All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Maureen Morse. I am the chairperson of the Libbytown Neighborhood Association. This is our monthly meeting for December 16th, 2020. And I guess we'll go around the circle and introduce ourselves, but I'll just call on you because I think that's easier than trying to figure out who's next. So we'll start. Oh, and I live on Whitney Avenue. And then we'll start with Fred.
Hey, I'm Fred Dillon. I live at 18 Davis Street, and I've been kicking around Libbytown for quite a few years and grew up about a half mile from here, so I'm a long-time Portland resident.
And Maeve? We can't hear you, Maeve.
You're muted, Maeve, sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
All right, Maeve Pistering on Bolton Street. I'm vice chair.
Great. Zach?
Zach Beveritz, Hunter Street, past chair.
And Leah. Hey, Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah. I live on Bradley Street, and I've come to like 4 meetings because I had 2 babies, and they're both asleep right now.
All right. And Margaret, I see.
Hi, I'm Margaret. I'm on Stevens Ave, and I only moved here 12 years ago, so my opinion means nothing.
we'll get to that. Cliffhanger. And Eric?
Hey everybody, are we saying where we're introducing?
Just introduce yourself, yeah.
Eric Anderson, we live at 84 Douglas Street.
Great. And Sam Zager's here, but he's on his bicycle, and I don't know if he's muted, so. Sam
Hey everyone, Sam
right.
Zager. I live on Prospect Street, so I guess I'm an honorary member of Libbytown, but I'm also the state representative for District 41, which includes part of Libbytown. So thank you so much for organizing this.
Yes, thank you. And I think, like we said, I think this is the first time we've had an attendee who is actively riding a bicycle attend one of our meetings. So that's a first. And then we're joined also by Jonathan, is it Sahrbeck?
Yes.
Who's the Cumberland County District Attorney. So if you want to just briefly introduce yourself, we have a couple of items of business, and then we'll sort of yield the floor to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like Maureen said, I'm Jonathan Sahrbeck. I'm the District Attorney here in Cumberland County. I had reached out to numerous of neighborhood associations just to kind of offer up a just question and answer period. People have any thoughts on what they're seeing in their neighborhoods and want to connect with the DA. I just wanted to make myself available. And also I have 2 prosecutors who work for me that live on Bolton Street and Whitney Avenue. So I'm pretty familiar with the Libbytown area.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And then just as a quick order of business, I just wanted to call for an approval of last month's meeting minutes. Did anybody have any additions or corrections for the minutes that Fred sent out for last month's meeting?
And there was a special quiz there, as with all. I'm going to keep including like these bogus references to people that were guests that weren't really guests. Was anyone paying attention?
See, I read them when they first came out, and I don't remember now.
Who was the special guest last month that really wasn't a guest? Reverend Billy from the Church of Stop Shopping. And there's a link there so you can watch a video. So if you click on the link, you'll be able to see the video.
I'm gonna have to make a note of these. And then Damon will give us the treasurer's report, I assume, when he arrives in the meeting. So I guess we'll start out with our DA and just, find out, I guess, what's going on in the DA's office. I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone from the DA's office, so this is a cool first.
See, that's a good thing, Maureen, because that either means that you're not a defendant or not a victim, and those are good things not to be in this situation. So,
Can I ask, do you have a file on us?
I don't know, Fred. Do you want me to look into that, or should I?
Maybe not.
No,
I'm sorry.
But in all seriousness, so we've been doing a lot of work with the Bayside Neighborhood Association for a number of years for reasons that basically just Sarah Mankiewicz had reached out to us, and we sort of wanted to have a dialogue going on so people could be aware of what they were seeing happening in their neighborhood and how it involved in the criminal justice system. Because as you all know, or as some people know, some people don't, that when the police make an arrest, it's my office, the district attorney's office, that's the one who actually prosecutes the case, or maybe doesn't prosecute the case, depending on the circumstances. So we have to make those decisions, and we look at a wide variety of what's happening. But a lot of the work we want to do is in sort of the prevention field, and get out and educate people about what we're seeing that comes into the court system, and see how we can resolve things so they actually don't rise to the level of getting involved in the criminal justice system. Because just like I said, it's really never a good thing to be involved in the criminal justice system, because, like I said, you're either being victimized or you're involved with law enforcement. And for whatever reasons you become involved in law enforcement, we're hoping to find ways that are going to address whatever circumstances are getting you involved with law enforcement, and finding solutions to those so people don't fall into that mix. Because like I said, it's really never a benefit for anybody. We obviously have to address situations as they come to us in the court system and with the district attorney's office. But if we can try to find a better solution, then we're always open for those ideas. So that's something that I'm just sort of offering up to you all. If you have questions about what's going on in the court system, or if you have concerns or questions about what you're seeing in your neighborhood, if there's something that I can do to help with that situation or bring to the attention of the Portland Police Department. We have a very good relationship with the Portland Police Department and their community policing that they do. And so if there's things that I can sort of be a liaison or anything along those lines, I'd be happy to help with that. From my experience, the Portland Police Department is, hopefully you all have the same experience that I have seen, that they are very receptive to concerns that the Portland community does have. They're willing to address those things, but sort of getting to the right people, if you do have those concerns, is always something that can be beneficial if you have a face to a name or anything along those lines, if people do want to reach out. So that's kind of my little spiel for being part of this meeting, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or I did, like I said, when I reached out to some of the neighborhood associations, I did get a response back that was like, wait, what did we do wrong? Or why are you reaching out to us? What's happening right now? And I was like, no, it's nothing bad. I just wanted to just kind of offer it up to see if people did have concerns. And if there aren't any, fantastic. But I thought it'd be a good idea to just basically, like I said, put that, give you guys the opportunity to get a face to a name, and offer anything I can help. And I can give you my contact information. I'll put it in the chat. So if people have questions tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, I'll give you my email address, and you can always reach out as well.
Excellent. We can include that in the notes for this meeting too, if you'd like.
Sure.
I can send those along to Fred, so that, because we send those out after the meeting.
And we definitely have had some sporadic things over the years, right? But I mean, I wouldn't characterize it as being, rising to the level where we have. I mean, we've got homelessness, and that's an issue with, encampments, but it's almost like it's a bummer that they get kicked out of the encampments because they got nowhere else to go, so.
And that's something that I hear from the police as well. I mean, they basically are to the point where they're just kind of moving people along, and it's obviously not illegal to be homeless, and the police don't ever want to put somebody in a situation where you're being placed under arrest because you're experiencing homelessness. So it can be, in a way, very sort of frustrating for them as well, because they don't have the solutions to really address what the underlying issue is. And as we all know, housing in Portland is, I think, one of the biggest problems that we have with regards to getting people housed, the affordability and just the access to it. It can be very, very challenging for people. And that's where we see a lot of these people fall into the court system and get involved with law enforcement because they don't have that opportunity. And we try to make it so when we try to come up with a solution for a case, that we come up with a way that somebody's going to be able to access those services, because we don't want to see a revolving door when it comes to Cumberland County Jail. And unfortunately, with some individuals we do see that, and we got to think of a better way to do things so we can end that cycle.
Jonathan, do you have any more insight into, I mean, all I know is what I read in the paper about the deal that fell through with trying to house the some of the homeless folks in, right next to the Cumberland County Jail, and apparently there was an insurance issue, or was there any more
Yeah.
insight to that, or is that?
No, that's what I heard too. I mean, I knew when I talked to the county manager, Jim Gailey, when that proposal was there, and he said that they were going to do a tour of the law enforcement center to basically provide that as an opportunity. And I don't know if there. I did hear initially there was sort of a people are kind of disappointed because it really felt like a lot of people thought that. I mean, and I can understand why, because it's on the same sort of complex, but they were thinking, okay, you just gave us a jail for housing the homeless. Like that doesn't send a good message. That those aren't good optics. But I think what they were thinking was that this is basically being underutilized because of the pandemic. Why don't we open it up? And then it just, with regards to an insurance, I think that they didn't have the ability to basically, and at the end of the day, open it up as they had saw fit. So I don't have much more details than that, but it's unfortunate because that is just still sitting there. It's nothing like it got utilized for something else. It's still just vacant at this time.
I have a couple of concerns. I guess one is a sort of general one. I read a Herald article years ago about the lack of prosecutorial oversight. Judges, police, defense attorneys all have apparently far more oversight than prosecutors. So there's a sort of thought that there's the impetus is not towards justice, but towards competitiveness about winning cases, and so with a lot of false convictions and stuff. But in terms of like homelessness, the concern I've been having of thinking about a lot recently is that, like, yes, homelessness isn't illegal, but public drinking is. So that those who are homeless are going to be more likely to be subject to arrest for something like public drinking. However, public drinking is legal if you have a permit or a license. So those that can afford to purchase, a license and a permit can then sell alcohol, and those who can, afford the premium on that alcohol are allowed to drink in public, whereas the poor are not. And so there's a sort of fundamental inequality to much of the justice system, particularly when it comes to these sort of behavioral crimes. I mean, drinking is drinking. It's, what drinking in public is drinking in public. I mean, it's not illegal to drink. It's just certain circumstances. Prostitution. That it's certainly a more fraught subject, but it's the circumstances, the way in which you do it, becomes illegal. So those are particular concerns, and particularly in light of the racial equity, BLM protests, and everything else.
Jonathan, it sounds like Zach's got a file on you.
So Zach, I'll try to answer those. I think there are about 3 or 4 very solid, good questions about what I do and sort of what we have to do as prosecutors. The first of all, I would say that when it comes to oversight of a prosecutor, especially a district attorney, there's some very important oversight, and that happens every 4 years. The district attorney is an elected position. He or she is accountable to the people. Those people have a right to make a decision and vote either for somebody or try to or reelect somebody or not reelect somebody. So that's a very important oversight that I think that is something that a district attorney always has to think about, and whether or not he or she is doing the job that the electors have given to that person, and really kind of asked that person to be that representative in the criminal justice system who's looking out for them, for public safety, for victims, but also thinking about ways of doing things better to be more fair, be more just. Being a prosecutor isn't about putting people in jail. It's not about finding people guilty. It's literally by acting in the interest of justice. That's the oath that we take as prosecutors. And to me, acting in the interest of justice is doing what's fair and doing what's right. Prosecutors are a very, very powerful position. It's one of those things that some people know about, but some people don't. We have the ultimate discretion. We bring cases and we can dismiss cases by just signing a piece of paper. We don't need the judge to tell us yes or no whether or not we can dismiss a case, but we do it often, and we do it when it's in the interest of justice, when it is in the benefit of the community to either not go forward with the prosecution, or if we come upon information that leads us to believe that the fair thing to do, the right thing to do, is dismiss a case. And so the idea that prosecutors just want to put people in jail or get a win-loss record, to me, that's a foreign concept. I know it probably does happen, but that's not what we do in Cumberland County, and it's not how I've been a prosecutor for going on about 14 years now. I'm from Maine originally, but I worked as a prosecutor down in Massachusetts for a number of years before coming back to Maine. And that's something that I learned pretty quickly about the power that we have. It's a great responsibility, but at the same time, you have to be, you have to really have be willing to play with a level playing field here, because it's an ultimate power we have. And if we don't use that discretion in the right way, we're using it in the wrong way. And the thing that I've definitely learned is that because of the power that I have, because of the position I'm in, that there's a possibility that I can do harm. And because I have the ability to take somebody's liberty away. And as we know, liberty is a very important fundamental right that we have in this country. And if I do that in a way that's not just, then guess what? I am not doing my job that the people have put me in this position to do. And so it's definitely something that we take very seriously. And if people have questions about that, if people are saying, well, Sahrbeck, why did you do it this way? Why did you make this decision? I better be able to answer. And if I can't answer, then I got some explaining to do. And I owe people an explanation on that front. The other thing that you were asking about with the drinking in publics and people experiencing homelessness, that is something that we've been talking about for a number of years in Cumberland County, especially with regards to what's going on or what has been happening for a number of years in the Bayside neighborhood. Like, when someone is experiencing homelessness, they don't have a living room to go to have a beer in. They don't have a backyard to sit with their friends and have a cocktail. So what do you do? Well, I can tell you the Portland Police Department is not walking around trying to arrest people for drinking in public. Sometimes there are definitely scenarios where people get arrested for drinking in public, but in those scenarios, it's usually where the person may be on the level of intoxication to a point where they might be beyond their own control. And so that arrest might actually get them off the street to the point where they would no longer be intoxicated. And that intoxication level was rising to the point where they might be a danger to themselves or others. That's usually where we see those drinking in public arrests being made. A lot of times there's a lot of warnings or a situation where they're asked to basically empty a drink and basically move on their way. But that is something that we actually explored, whether or not we could do sort of, for lack of a better term, a beer garden. Something along those lines of a place where actually people could drink. The problem came, I think, within the city, because it would be the city signing off on it. Obviously, the DA the district attorney doesn't own property or anything along those lines, as in public parks. I could ever be somebody who actually opens up a location where people who are experiencing homelessness would have an opportunity to go drink beer. But the city, I think, lacked an insurance liability when it came to whether or not they could monitor a situation like that. I mean, yes, the old port does have people who are drinking, but there are obviously restrictions that are put in place with liquor licenses and security and police details if necessary, bouncers. Bartenders they are trained to look for people who have been overserved and not serve those people. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. Obviously, I'm realistic about that. But so that was something that was explored. And I think it's a valid concern or something to bring up to the city to see if it's something that needs to be explored again. I think drinking in public arrests have definitely come down, not just since the pandemic, but even before that, because of concerns that we had and what that actually was doing. I think the Cumberland County Jail was getting tired of processing people who come in for those arrests. People have to remember, when an arrest is made by a police officer, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just you throw the handcuffs on them, you bring them down to the jail, and that's it. There's some work that's involved. You got to write a report. You have to be in a situation where you take yourself out of, you basically take yourself off the street to bring that person to the jail, which means that the police officers who are left on the street are going to be shorthanded for a minor time. And also police know too, every time that they put handcuffs on somebody, that they could be subject to a 1983 claim for a civil rights violation. So police are concerned about that and thinking about that when they have to make those arrests too. And so the last thing I think that I'll try to get into just quickly, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too long here, but the racial equity situation that we're seeing here across the country, but also here in Maine. This is something that I've been addressing actually since I became the DA. Last summer in 2019, I had my prosecutors come in for an implicit bias training, which really actually looked into what we do as prosecutors. It was put on by a district attorney named Jarvis Parsons, who's actually the district attorney down in a place called Brazos County, Texas, but he's actually a Maine law grad. I went to a training down in DC and he did this presentation on implicit bias, and the first picture he put on there was of a Portland headlight, and you could see me in the audience because I'm smiling ear to ear. That's my hometown. And he says, anyone from Maine? And he sees me and he's like, oh, you're from Maine. I say, yeah. And Jarvis was at Maine Law in 2000, and he was one of 2 black students that were in the entire school. But what he basically had moved down to Jersey after being in Maine, and then ended up in Texas with his wife and became a prosecutor. His first internship was with the Cumberland County DA's office. And he puts on this implicit bias training for the very reason that I was just talking about. As prosecutors and as people, everybody has implicit bias. Everybody needs to understand that this is something that's inherent in the human condition. But for prosecutors and for police as well, we are the people, like I said before, that we can do harm in a way. We have that power over somebody's life and liberty, and we have to make sure that we keep that in check. And if we don't, then we're not doing the job as best as we can. And so there's different methods of what we can do to make sure that we are keeping that in check, that we are being aware of what we've been doing. And in light of the murder of George Floyd, we've been taking even more steps. I just had a 6-part training with my prosecutors by a group called MindBridge that not just looked into implicit bias training, but also into adverse childhood experience, something that I've been talking about for the last 9 months before the pandemic began, about what trauma can do to individuals and their involvement in the criminal justice system. We have seen data that shows that about 70% of people involved in the criminal justice system and people who are experiencing a substance use disorder have an adverse childhood experience score of 4 or more. Well, guess what? One of those, an adverse childhood experience is racism. And so if you have a child who has sustained trauma and experiences racism, which I think a vast majority of our people, BIPOC community here, not just in Maine, but across this country do experience, that puts someone's adverse childhood experience score already at 1. And then if you throw in the mix of poverty or substance use disorder or physical or mental or emotional abuse in the house, or a single parent or divorce, or a parent incarcerated, those are all adverse childhood experiences. And so when you can really show that correlation between people who get involved in the criminal justice system and adverse childhood experience and trauma, it's a recipe for people. To me, it really demonstrates why we have to be working on the prevention, the preventative aspects of dealing with and educating the community about these experiences, and then taking steps to really try to make it so people don't undergo this at a young age or even at an older age with either substance use disorder or mental health issues. Because if we can do that better, then that's going to be less people who are coming into the criminal justice system. It's a long road to take, because obviously we can't undo 10, 20, 30 years of trauma just by snapping our fingers. But it is something to really start to think about as a community as a whole, and what we can do to make a better change in the long run.
I have a quick question sort of related. Oh, sorry, Zach. Did you have anything else?
No,
Yeah.
actually, sorry, go ahead.
And that it's good to hear about all the programs. I had no idea, and I didn't know about the adverse score, but I guess, and you sort of stated things well, but better than I did. But it's the sort of the discretion that's my concern. In an less responsible district attorney, so much is left up to their discretion. That's sort of what I meant by lack of oversight. But then in terms of the lifestyle crimes, I was trying to connect them or not decouple them from racial bias crimes. It's just that people who, yes, people generally don't get busted just for drinking, but the drinking is the thing to get them arrested. So it's more likely to be someone who's poor or of color to be arrested for something like that.
Yep.
So that, that's my concern. So
no, and that's a valid observation to make, because that's one of the issues that you have when you have systems that are already in place where really marginalized people are either placed within a certain neighborhood or don't have that same opportunity to move to other places, or this is where these individuals unfortunately are the only opportunity that they have when it comes to housing opportunities. And so what happens then there might be more calls to service, then there might be more complaints about property crime, and then that leads to an issue of police presentation in a certain, or not police presentation, excuse me, police presence in a certain situation, which might lead to overexposure to a certain group of people that they have too many, or they have more law enforcement encounters than others, which lead to more and to unequal arrests numbers. And so that is a concern, and it's a systematic change that we really have to be thinking at a fundamental level of how can we do better? How can we provide more opportunities to more people to make things more equal? I attended a training a few weeks ago where it was described sort of as this was a training put on by the Racial Equity Institute, and I'd urge anybody to attend if they get an opportunity to do it. But how they described it was, if you put a large amount of crabs in a bowl, you're going to see some very, very terrible things happen among those crabs. And because they are just put on top of each other, they don't have any opportunity to get out. And it becomes a situation where it's a fight for survival. And it's very it's depressing to say that, and it's sad to say that, but that's a type of situation that we've seen in a lot of places that don't give people the same opportunities. And so what can we do better? What can we as a community come together and give more people more opportunity so that they're not in that situation anymore? And to me, it goes way beyond what I can do in my office as a district attorney. But at the same time, we all need to be part of these conversations. We all have to listen to people who are having this lived experience, who are going through these things. That I'm very privileged to say that I have not gone through that lived experience, but I want to listen to people who have, and I want to come up with solutions to take good steps and positive steps to hope that we can make positive changes, not just within our community, but in the state as a whole.
Yeah, it seems pretty positive. I'm reading a book by Ibram Kendi now on how to be an anti-racist. Is kind of strikes at some of the heart of what you're talking about, and the idea of I mean, the victimization or the kind of demonization that we all as white folks just have these we do have these implicit ideas about what what some of the challenges are. So from my perspective, it's pretty encouraging that you folks are engaged in this, kind of at least trying to learn more about it and being, recognizing that there are these blind spots that we all have about, or many of us have about these issues. So it's encouraging. I'm encouraged by it.
Yeah, I have a quick question actually, also sort of related to police officers and the idea of police officers being in schools as safety officers rather than like when I went to high school, we had like I guess you'd call it like a rent-a-cop, like a security guard, essentially at my school. I went to school in Boston, but we never had a uniformed Boston police officer there. And a lot of Black Lives Matter activists have said that these school officers can contribute to more kids being in the system at a younger age, being arrested for transgressions that other kids might just receive, disciplinary sentences for within the school. So I don't know if the DA office or you have a position on whether or not, police officers in schools are beneficiary, or do they bring kids into the system younger than they normally would be?
Yeah, see, to me, the school to prison pipeline is a real thing if you look at the data. But to me, that doesn't actually always correlate to, because there's a school resource officer within the school system, that's going to lead to more arrests or more summons or more kids being involved in incarceration or along those lines. Because to me, a school resource officer isn't just about a police presence in school. It's almost as if it's a community liaison in a way, so people get to know, so kids get to know police officer if they do need to take that step, or if they do have a situation where they can't go to somebody in the school, they can't go to a parent, that they can reach out to know who the police officers are. So I see there's a lot of positive attributes to it. I can see the other arguments on the other side. For me, I am a supporter of the school resource program, the school resource officer program. But then again, I'm also somebody who wants to defer to the people in their own community to make those decisions. That's why we have school boards, and that's why people can make those decisions. But I do think that one of the bigger issues that we have that leads to the school to prison pipeline is actually just the disciplinary measures that, regardless of whether or not you have an SRO in your school or not, on how we actually go about disciplining kids in school. South Portland, not just their high school, but their middle school, they've been doing a program that's involving restorative justice for a number of years. And what their program does is actually, when a kid breaks the rules, either gets in a fight or does something that's inappropriate or brings substances to school, that they have a program that really actually looks at what the implications of that kid doing what they did, why they did what they did, and addressing the harm that was caused by the kid doing what they did. And they've had some very, very good, very, very positive outcomes in that program, because it doesn't just say, okay, you get detention or you're suspended. It really takes that measure of trying to address the issue, because we know a lot about with kids that kids are not inherently bad, that there's usually a situation going on that a kid is behaving in a way. So they start peeling back that layers. It's, to me, I did a stint as a a juvenile prosecutor in Lowell, Massachusetts, when I was a prosecutor down in Mass. And one of the things that we always saw, or we didn't always see, I shouldn't say it like that, but when we saw a kid who at a very young age was starting fires, we knew that that kid is not an arsonist. We knew that there was something going on with that kid, that he's acting out. And so we had a diversionary program called a fire centers program that really actually brought the kids and their parents, which was the key thing, in to start talking to some authorities to really kind of understand what's happening with this kid. And a lot of times what we would end up finding was that this kid was a victim of some sort of abuse or neglect. And so that's sort of what I think a lot of schools really need to take that step and use these restorative practices a lot more, because they're actually going to address what the actual harm and what the issues behind the harm is going on with those kids in a much better way than just simply giving a kid a suspension or a detention. When I was in 8th grade, I remember there was 2 guys that I was in middle school with that got caught with marijuana, and they got an automatic 5-day suspension. And all of us were looking around being like, what the hell is that doing? All those guys are doing is sitting home smoking pot right now. it really wasn't addressing what the actual bigger issue was that was going on. And I think that, to me, that's what the school systems really have to take a look at when it comes to how they're going about the discipline for their students, if it's necessary.
I mean, I would also add in all the things that make a school like a prison, lining up and bells and hall monitors. And even if you don't have police, you have teachers, deans, whoever, and fellow students, all making sure that someone isn't roaming the halls illegally. You know, these are all things that we take for granted in schools, but it's a kind of an oppressive system, whether or not there's a SRO in there or not.
Yeah.
You know, if you compare it to like a hippie school where the kids run around, you know, there's none of that. I'm not saying that's better.
I have one other point to bring up. One of the things that our neighborhood has raised a concern is traffic safety. And one of the issues with that is around bad design, but there's also the enforcement side of things. So I think one thing we'd like to look at is whether there could be a shift from viewing motor vehicle use as something of a, you know, a right over to a privilege, which is really what it is. People have the privilege to operate a motor vehicle based on their exercise of due care. And a lot of us have been seeing that that's not the case. People drive through our neighborhood as fast as they can to get from one place to another place without regard for the safety of people in the neighborhood. So I think it'd be good to see, you know, the whole system step up its enforcement of regulations on motor vehicle use, especially looking at safety. And I know there's some issues where there might be bias in that enforcement. So looking at some ways to reduce that bias are great. Like you've mentioned, another thing some people have brought up are camera-based enforcement, which tends to take the bias out of it. And that's not currently allowed in Maine, but you know, if the state legislature were to change that and allow some pilots, I would like to see that perhaps be something in Cumberland that could happen in Cumberland County.
Oh, those are great points. I mean, that's something that I remember when I was 16. I think it was my father telling me that this isn't a right, this is a privilege to have your license. Unfortunately, in Maine, luckily Portland doesn't have this issue as some other places do, but there's such a lack of public transportation for people that it's almost looked at that this is a fundamental right that people have when it comes to their license. So you do see sort of a difference between what's happening in Portland and what happens in the other state, especially other counties. I'm friends with the district attorney on the Mid-Coast, and she was telling me that they have basically no public transportation out there. So when someone does get their license suspended, it really can be detrimental to that person being able to live because they're really not able to access their home, access their work, travel around. So that's sort of a bigger systems issue that we really would have to address. But to me, I'm hearing what you're saying with regards to it being a privilege, not a right, because that's how I've always viewed it. And you have to abide by what the laws are with regards to making sure that you are operating a vehicle in a safe manner, because we all know that a vehicle that's not being operated safely is in fact a very, very heavy projectile that is going through the street and can be very dangerous if it's not being handled by somebody who's taking it seriously for the people around them. I wasn't aware, Damon, what you said about the traffic enforcement. I went to law school down in DC, and I remember that they definitely had those cameras that would flash if you were going through a red light. And I wasn't aware that those under state law weren't around. So I would contact your state legislature if you want, or state legislator, state reps, state senators, if you want to see that changed. Because to me, video is actually a very, very useful tool when it comes to the type of work when either traffic enforcement or prosecution work as a whole, because cameras don't tell different stories. You can get two very reasonable people who witness the same thing and walk away thinking two different things. But when you have it on video, it's very difficult to get those two different portrayals happening at that same time, because you just go straight to the videotape.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, I feel like I've taken probably all of your meetings, so I apologize for if I went on for too long. But if, like I said, I put my name in the chat if people have any, or my email, my phone number, if people have any questions. If anybody has any more questions, I still have some time. I just, like I said, I don't want to take up, monopolize your whole meeting here.
Maureen, you're muted.
Maureen,
I'm
you're
just joking about my perfectly planned agenda where we're running 3 minutes behind. So it's.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Right. Usually when I'm on Zoom and I start talking, I'm muted and I get off mute, I say, well, you guys just missed the most brilliant thing that anybody's ever said in their life. So
I was just muted because my husband came in the house yelling about hello and what's for dinner, and I muted it. But yes, thank you so much for coming in and joining us. This is great.
yeah, no, thank you for having me, for sure.
I really
So,
appreciate it.
but please don't be strangers. If anybody has any questions or concerns that come up in the future or whenever, feel free to reach out. Okay.
and be careful, Jonathan. Zach is watching you.
Yeah.
No, great
Very
question,
nice.
Zach. Let's. If this was normal times, I'd say let's grab some coffee and have a chat. But
Someday,
maybe
maybe.
6 months, 9 months down the road, we'll see.
I think you're the first politician to, or elected official to volunteer to come not during campaign season. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, and also thank you for not calling me a politician, because I don't like the politician. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Be in
you.
touch.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So Damon, I don't know if you want to do a quick treasurer's report now that.
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
Sorry I wasn't at the last meeting.
It's like you had a baby or something. God.
Yeah, I think, yeah, there was childcare needs. Yeah, let me just open it. Thank you everyone for doing the Clink thing. We keep having money come in slowly but surely. We're not spending much money, so our current balance is $344. Something about $57 has come in since, I think, in the last 2 months since I last reported. So, average is close to $30 a month or so right now. So if anyone needs bags, let me know. I'll drop them off. It's a fun activity, excuse to get out with kids. So just let me know. You can either message me. If I don't have your address, just let me know your address.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And next on the agenda, I attended a meeting that was facilitated by Yamaya Preble Street, just to sort of get the neighborhood associations together. There's not a whole lot to report other than that I could probably get some of the Preble Street folks to come to one of our meetings that was mentioned. Basically, everyone just sort of voiced their concerns. The people who are in closer proximity to Preble Street had more concerns, as you can imagine. People talking about the crowding in Deering Oaks Park, and some folks from St. John Valley had some concerns about Florence House. It was a friendly meeting, but there wasn't really a whole lot of new information that came out, other than that I think they're trying to reach out more. So if anybody ever has concerns about or wants to meet with Preble Street, you can always let me know, and I can reach out to them to come to one of our meetings. But I didn't really get a whole lot of new information out of it, but I wanted to just update you guys on that. And then Zach, you had attended a PAN meeting that I was unable to go to. Did you have any report from that?
Yes. A lot of the PAN meeting was dealt with sort of administrative stuff, and then but they're going to do quarterly meetings with the mayor and manager. The next one, or the first one, is in February, and the main topic is the recode. Subject near and dear to my heart, but apparently not too many of the other PAN members, because there were these sort of grave grave warnings of zone consolidation, which got a few of the the people nervous. So they're going to, you know, at this meeting, they are expecting to have the planning director there and ask them, you know, what will be the public process? How, you know, how can we, you know, how will we be notified and how will we be, you know, engaged and have a say, you know, whether our neighborhood will be rezoned. I brought up the point that the comprehensive plan was that feedback and that the recode is the implementation of the comprehensive plan. And that was not a popular opinion, at least with one person. So that's the PAN report.
All right. And then we were gonna discuss traffic. So there's been several traffic related topics brought up. So I thought we'd just sort of consolidate them into a conversation. Margaret, I know you're here. You had proposed a speed reduction on the corner of Stevens and Congress, and it sounds like you got a no from MDOT on that already.
Yeah, I asked for it during the District 3 meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Backing up, November 24th, on the city's Facebook page, they announced that the speed was dropped between Forest and Brighton on Stevens. I'm absolutely confused as to this DMZ at Brighton Avenue that means anything they do at Stevens has to stop at Brighton Avenue and it can't go to Congress. It's been that way since the 1990s. Like literally, they've done no studies, no work, no plans. It always stops at Brighton. So it just seemed like such a small ask. If you can stop, you know, if you can drop the speed limit on the rest of Stevens Avenue, what's a few more blocks? But so anyway, I posted at the district meeting and nobody had any idea what I was talking about, which was kind of interesting. So then we followed up in emails and Chris Branch at Public Works seemed like he was reasonably okay with the idea. Or, you know, he'd look into it. He didn't say no, but then as soon as it hit the traffic engineer and they put it to MDOT, they said no, absolutely no way. That reducing speed will not reduce accidents or fatalities, which is quite frankly one of the strangest things I've ever heard. I'd love to see any study that shows that reducing speed doesn't reduce fatalities and accidents. But basically they just, MDOT said no.
Who was the traffic engineer at MDOT, Margaret?
Jeremiah Bartlett at the city reached out to MDOT. I don't know who he talked to at MDOT.
Yep.
The head traffic engineer is Steve Landry.
Right, I saw that email. I'm not sure who Jeremiah is talking to, but
I followed up with Jeremiah on that, and I said, do you think that maybe they said this because of this or because of that? And he said, if either of us came up with an explanation, it would be pure speculation. So, you know, translation is, yes, that was a strange assertion.
Okay.
Well, they already lowered the speed limit on another portion of the same street. It seems strange.
Sorry,
yeah.
Margaret, could you clarify again? I did see the email chain, but so it was speed drop between Forest and Brighton on Stevens, and then you wanted to extend it from Brighton to Congress, is that right?
Exactly. That was my very small, specific, finite request. It just seemed like such a small, finite thing.
Yeah.
You know, just a step in the right direction, but.
Jeremiah also said that they don't, changing the speed limit doesn't tend to make much of a difference regardless.
So I heard that as well, but I'll just point out that the city has done nothing, or at DOT, there is one sign at Forest Avenue alerting you to the change. There is no other notification. There's nothing on the city's website. There was one Facebook page post from the city. They've done nothing to announce this. So why, I mean, does anybody honestly look at the speed limit sign on the street that they drive day in and day out for a change?
I will say I had no idea that the speed limit was changed.
Nobody
had
does.
no idea.
So, I mean, for them to say, you know, oh, well, we did this experiment and there was no change is kind of ridiculous because nobody knows about the change.
Well, I mean, he was just speaking in general.
What
I
he told me was that publicity makes no difference, which is, quite frankly, I think ridiculous. But I told him flat out, you change the speed limit, we'll take care of the publicity. And he said publicity makes no difference.
I mean, I haven't delved into this stuff for a while, but I'm pretty sure, Margaret, that you're right, that the studies that do exist on it actually say the exact opposite, that reducing speed does, in fact, reduce fatalities and crashes, I think. I mean, I think that there's data to support that.
Well, absolutely for pedestrians and bicyclists. It may not for cars, but we know there is study after study that says your odds as a pedestrian of surviving a crash at 25 miles an hour is, I can get the numbers. It's far higher than if the car is going 30 or 35.
Yeah, but
Again, MDOT doesn't care about bikes and pedestrians. They just care about cars.
But
Why?
the issue is, it's not the issue of changing the speed limit, it's changing the speed. And
Yeah, so what about
he
raised
said
tables?
changing the speed limit doesn't
Again,
generally correspond, people speed anyway.
Oh,
So
I see what
more
you're right.
effective is
right.
empowering,
Right, that's an
you know,
important.
like we saw on the other streets in between Brighton and Congress.
So we need like traffic calming,
Why is
basically.
MDOT involved in the first place? I don't understand. It's not a city set.
Because it's State Route 9 along here. So State Route 9 goes on Stevens between Congress to Brighton and then over to Woodford, and then it hooks right on Woodford. So that's all State Route 9, and that's why they get a say. But I will point out that they just dropped the speed limit on Stevens north of Brighton, and Woodford is 25 miles an hour. So it's not as if you can't have a state route at 25 miles an hour. We have them. You know, I get it. Like, people will speed anyway, and we certainly need enforcement. But I mean, this end of Congress, this end of Stevens has been a drag racing strip as long as I've lived here, and it's just enough.
Well, and one thing to remember is actually Christian Milneal once famously referred to MDOT staff as being hidebound, and I think that that is really the case. I mean, they're just stuck in the, you know, they're stuck in the last century, literally, and it kind of sucks for us, right? I mean, and Zach's point is a good one. I mean, you can post the speed limit. That doesn't mean that's what folks are going to do. I mean, look at Congress Street along our stretch, you know, down in front of, you know, Tony's Donuts. It's a shit show, right? I mean, and they're 40, 45 miles an hour through there. So it's more about design, you know, but then that's all about volume, and it's just the brute force of traffic, you know, accommodating traffic volume, really.
Well,
you know?
but that's why I wanted that study from Marcos. And thank you, Zach, a billion times for getting that, because that study clearly shows that 25 to 30 miles an hour, closer to 25, actually moves more cars through a given amount of roadway than increasing the speed, because when you increase speed, you have to increase distance between cars. So thank you, Zach, for getting that study. That's a really critical statistic to be able to wave around in a meeting to say, you know what, 35 and 40 miles an hour does not actually increase traffic flow. If you're looking at car count, which is what really matters, I think.
So Margaret, I think one thing to point out is that maybe they have it backwards, where they're saying, oh, we can't reduce the speed limit because the design speed is such and such, and they'll just go that speed. So that's what we should set the speed limit to. But maybe the speed limit should be more aspirational, where you know, we set the speed limit to what we think the design speed in the neighborhood should be, and then we work to change the design to slow the speeds. There's some things that could be done relatively easily too, like narrowing the travel lanes, adding more street furniture. Maybe we could look at the main med grant. Like, there's ways that we could do that to like visually change things so drivers will slow down a bit just because of the design.
I agree with all of that. And, you know, I've been asking over and over and over again for like more trees. If you were at Frost Street and you couldn't see that light at Congress. So what happens now is people get to Frost Street, they're pissed off at all the, you know, speed bumps north of them, and they get to Frost Street and they just floor it towards Congress. if you couldn't see that light, maybe people would slow down. So like some trees would be great. I don't think striping does any good because it's just paint. I mean, they've already said, oh, we could stripe the lanes narrower. And well, that's great, but it's paint. How much good does it really do?
Oh, it's very effective.
Well, okay, what happens on Congress is that it's striped for 2 lanes and people just create a 3rd lane to turn right onto Stevens when they don't want to wait for the light.
Has
So,
anyone been around long enough to remember that really crazy thing that they did on Stevens Avenue down by Catherine McCauley maybe 15 years ago, where they stuck curbing in just as a marker they literally put asphalt curbing in to do traffic calming, and it actually worked.
that
But then
would
they
be
ripped it out
awesome.
of-
A
yeah.
physical thing would be awesome, but they're just, even like a rumble strip like they do on the highway to say, hey, you're out of your lane, and then have a bike lane. That'd be awesome. That would be awesome. But right now they're just talking about paint, and I'm just not convinced paint does any good because, I mean, those of you who use bike lanes, how much good does that paint do?
Well, narrowing the lane does help, but it's not the only thing that needs to be done. It's a step in the right direction, I think.
It's a step, but if you still have 5 feet of open pavement next to you with no physical barrier, I don't know how much good it does.
Yeah, adding trees, adding bump outs,
Visual friction.
benches, anything basically.
And so anyway, the plans, the other thing with the traffic is that those plans, I did finally get a copy of the plans for what they plan on doing with the sidewalks. And it turns out it actually goes all the way into Thompson's Point. So any comments are welcome. I mean, there is some attempt it's hard to explain because when you look at the existing versus the proposed, they sort of drew over it, but the dimensions, I don't know how to explain it. You have to look at the numbers, not what they drew. So they're
The
actually
drawings are mind bending. I tried to look at them and I was like, I can't understand.
yeah, and I mean, honestly, engineers just like, sorry to any engineers on this call, they just throw numbers on a page and they're like, yeah, just figure it out in the field. So, I mean, as an example, they show the existing sidewalk at this corner and they label the 8.5 feet, even though it's the same lines. They didn't actually adjust the drawing. They just noted 8.5 feet. So basically what that means is that the sidewalk will now extend way out into Stevens Avenue, which is great because we're going to have an 8.5 foot wide sidewalk instead of the 2 feet with the pole in the middle of it. And it'll also create a much tighter corner, hopefully slowing people down as they come flying around the corner. So those are great things. But one problem is it's going to back, I don't know how to explain it. The crosswalk's going to get pushed towards town on Congress Street. So it's going to be pretty much at Bradley, and that's going to cause a lot of problems for anybody trying to get in or out of Bradley. Over to you, Leah.
The Bradley Street advocate. Hi.
I talked to my neighbor today who actually is also on Bradley and, kind of put the idea out there, like, what would you think if they shut down Bradley? And she was like, I never use it. It's terrifying. So
Nobody uses it.
Right.
The only people who use it are cutting through.
And
so I guess I'll present now. I looked at the plans Margaret sent over and I was like, okay, they've done this great thing where they're bringing the crosswalk back. So instead of having to go down the 2 foot sidewalk, which is apparently 8 feet now, it's just like right at Bradley. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So where are you at, Bradley, and where?
I'm on Bradley.
I mean,
what
are you describing?
Well, the intersection is
the intersection of Bradley and Congress,
which is basically the intersection of Stevens and Congress. It's just that they're going to push the crosswalk back towards downtown, and that puts it closer to Bradley Street.
So it's like
here, okay. All right.
It's going to be there.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
So that is fine, but there's the lights are right here. So the issue is with Bradley is if anybody's trying to turn into Bradley from Congress and they're following Google Maps, which is going to tell them to do that, they're stopped. And then all the cars are stopped on Congress Street and there's no way to turn into Bradley. If you're trying to leave Bradley to turn left, that's also impossible. And I was hoping when they addressed this intersection that they would address that Bradley is essentially impassable onto Congress Street by either just moving that intersection, including Bradley in the intersection of Stephen and Congress, and they're not doing that. So my proposal is either they need to do that in some fashion, or Bradley should be a dead end at Congress, because it's still open to Brighton and it's open to Dirigo to Stevens. So it's not really shut off at that point. It's just that very dangerous intersection is closed. And then a lot of our cut through traffic is people cutting the corner because they don't want to stop at the light. So they'll just zip through. So
One thing they
That's
might
right.
do is a right turn in, right turn out, which wouldn't really
Right.
solve that issue you just brought up. But
it wouldn't solve that issue, but it would like mitigate some of the danger.
it would help with the
Okay.
other issues with the left
Yeah.
turns.
How do you actually do that, Damon? Just, I mean, if there's just signs, people will ignore it. How does that actually work?
Right, it'd be signage. I mean, how do roads work? I mean, there's got to be some enforcement, and that's why I brought it up with the DA. I mean,
Yeah.
We have that on Douglas at the end of Douglas Street, and it's really awesome here actually. Here on the end of
Oh, yeah.
Douglas is actually like a barrier, so that
Right.
would be another possibility, which might be nice for pedestrians too, to have a pedestrian island in the middle that they can hop to.
that's a good idea. Yeah, that would help a lot there.
That's the elementary school bus stop for most of this area. So people on Stevens Avenue have to go to Bradley to get for their elementary school age children to get the bus. So that's like another reason that intersection really needs to be paid attention to, is that you've like literally got 8-year-olds waiting for a bus.
Where are they waiting for the bus?
It's at the end of Bradley Street, right
Okay.
at Congress.
So right at
And
the
I've
end.
talked to them, I know, because anyway, for years I've had the kids walk through my yard instead of using the sidewalks. because
Right,
it's
because
dangerous.
sidewalks are scary.
Yeah, and so that's where they're going. And I've talked to them. I know that's the stop.
Yeah, okay, so if that was a barrier or something, there would be a place for them to stand.
Safer for the kids, that's for sure. It might have to be a gate that could be open for fire safety, but that's manageable.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
instead of,
I'm not really sure. Everybody I've spoken to who lives on this street or on Dirigo is like, well, we never use that intersection ever. So that would be great because it will keep our cut down. Because our cut down traffic, I know you guys all have cut through traffic, but our cut through traffic is the fastest because our road is the widest. And I've noticed people, they literally go over the speed bumps so fast that it shakes our homes.
So is there still some opportunity for public input to influence outcomes here, or is
Oh,
there?
this is all just at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about what's happening with the plans that Margaret has received, but she is collecting comments.
yes. There was no, I have been asking for these since 2018. And only because I keep asking over and over again did I finally, and actually I saw the surveyors had put fresh paint on the sidewalks. So I asked again, thinking, oh, this is finally it. And so he sent them. There is no actual official public process for this. They're just doing it. But I wanted to share it with the neighborhood and collect input because, this matters. I mean, the city knows this is an important intersection. They need to do it right because whatever they do, we're going to be stuck with for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
And we're on the verge of having a lot more housing added to this neighborhood where there's going to be more families theoretically with that new co-op project going in. Like this stuff needs to be addressed. There's more people walking. Even since I moved here, I've only lived here for 5 years and I walk everywhere and I see more people walking now than I did when I moved here and riding bikes and stuff. So they need to address this stuff, I think, for our neighborhood.
Well,
So
also,
Margaret-
I mean, Westgate's right there, and I see elderly people trying to get there, and and now that it's dark at 4:30 at night, it's pretty much impossible.
Mm-hmm. And little things can make a difference. Like someone told me who lives on Whitney Ave, where I live, that we used to have really bad cut through traffic on Whitney, cab drivers speeding to the bus station, but then they put that arm down at the end of the street so they can't get in through like on Sewell Street. So they have to go around anyway. So they don't I guess they just don't use Whitney anymore. And that's just a little thing that isn't even on this street that apparently had a big difference. So I don't know. I think there are some things that probably could be done to help.
Yeah.
But
Make it safer.
that puts more traffic onto Congress Street
Yeah.
and makes them speed on Congress Street. It doesn't.
Right. I mean, there's this ideal world where every street gets all the attention and the traffic is going 20 miles an hour. That's where I want to live.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm lucky Whitney Ave has sidewalks on both sides and lots of streets.
Yeah, we don't have
that.
sidewalks either.
Yeah, we have sidewalks all the way down except the last block on the city side doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's other problems with our street. I'm concerned about that intersection continuing to have the problems it currently has. Just
So
'cause
Margaret, I really hope we can add to the list right turn in, right turn out, and median, plus a third thing being some additional traffic coming on Bradley Street potentially.
Well, yeah. I mean, send me the comments in writing so I can put these into a letter. Definitely, like I'm familiar with the Bradley Street issues, but just send them to me in writing so I can collect it all. I mean, my main thing is that because I work with a lot of committees, I know it's really frustrating as a consultant to have different parts of the committee saying, no, we want more speed, and no, we want less speed. So I think, you know, if we could get all our comments together and sort of resolve them before we send it in, that would be ideal. So far, nobody's in conflict, so.
I think we all want less speed.
Yeah.
But, right.
I think we should make a motion to officially endorse or authorize Margaret to write a letter on behalf of LNA about this intersection.
Well, you'll get it for review before I send it. It will go to the list before I send it.
I second that.
Yeah. So the motion is for Margaret to write the letter, and then they'll be reviewed on the list.
Yeah, and collect feedback from anybody who's interested. And Maureen did send those plans to everybody, so that's great. And just, you know, the plans do go from Stevens all the way into Fort River. So there's a lot of intersections that are covered. So, you know, everybody, please, you know, whatever your issues are in various intersections, we'll collect it all.
How's about this? I'll just float this. This is a wild idea that we kicked out 10 or 12 years ago. 3 lanes on Congress Street along that stretch, you know. So 1 lane in either direction with a center turn lane, and you buy more real estate on there.
Yeah.
It's the dream. That's the dream, Fred.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they did it on Brighton. We wrote a letter, you know, the not yet formed Libbytown Neighborhood Association wrote a letter, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago to the city. And it's when Jeremiah Bartlett was working with Goral Palmer. So he was a traffic engineer with Goral Palmer at the time. He was doing the neighborhood meetings along with, what was the guy's name that was leading the charge? It was another traffic engineer. And we were meeting at what's now the apartments on the corner of Whitney that was the St. Patrick's, you know, the elementary school there. But at any rate, didn't fly. And I think the traffic counts back then were similar between Brighton and Congress, maybe a little bit more in Congress, but just looking at, again, this brute force of traffic logic, right? I mean, we were trying to make the case back then. And I think it'd be worth just keep pounding on that as much as we can, because I think that would really help reduce speeds on Congress, you know?
Yeah, I like that idea a lot, I think.
It also would free up space for bike lanes and wider sidewalks. I mean,
Absolutely.
Those sidewalks have no esplanade.
Yeah, I mean, that's a crappy walking environment. I mean, I know we've all done it. I mean, it's just to walk along there to Shaw's or on either side. I mean, you're 2 feet from cars speeding by at 50 miles an hour sometimes. It's crazy.
I once had, I sort of not on purpose caused a car accident because I was crossing one of the side streets on Congress. There was nobody coming, and all of a sudden someone zoomed down, and then they wanted to turn right into the street. They stopped, and the car behind them hit them because everybody was just going so fast. And I was just crossing a side street. There was no car coming when I started. And it's just like, that's not safe.
Yeah, and it's like that issue we've been talking about back when I came to meetings in the past with the 2-way, park in Congress over there. The rest of the area is 1-lane road. So you put a couple 2-lane roads, and that's what you're saying, Margaret. When people finally get through the slow part of Stevens, they see those 3 lanes and they're like, I'm gonna fucking get there.
Yeah, on the floor.
And they
Especially when they see that light is green and they want to beat it.
Yeah, and if there weren't 3 lanes there, because you weren't turning into a 2-lane road and 1 lane, then the desire to go that fast would probably be lessened.
Yeah, I mean, who was it? Who were we talking to? We had a guest here a couple of months ago that I think I was teasing him as I'm wont to do about. I was driving through your neighborhood. It was who's the developer guy that's doing the project over at the West School. I mean, he said, "Oh yeah, I was driving through Libbytown and said, I hope you weren't going 50 miles an hour." He said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I mean, it was just designed that way, or something like that." He's working with Liz Trice. What's the? I can't remember.
Oh, Brian A.
Oh yeah, Brian. Yeah. He was the one that said, "Yeah, I mean, it's my bad. I mean, that's just, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have the look on that part of the stretch of Congress. It doesn't look like it's a residential neighborhood, really. It just looks like Route 1 in Massachusetts. It just looks like stores next to a highway.
But that's
Yeah,
what's frustrating
I
about,
wish it were like Saugus.
Yeah, right.
but that's what's so frustrating about this end of Stevens is that we are residential.
Mhm.
And, you know, my neighbors care. I can't believe how nice their yards are. Everybody's got lights up, and yet they're afraid to have their kids wait for the bus because they're going to get hit.
No.
And but
Yeah, I
we're
tried to cross Stevens at Kapizik, and it is not fun. That's for sure.
I've
No,
been
it's
on this little dead
I-
end street on Davis Street crying every Halloween because I can't get any kids to cross Congress Street and come over to our house, actually. So it's super sad, actually. My wife says, what are you doing? Why are you getting, you know, and I don't get candy. I get like granola bars and you know, apples or stuff that kids would never want to have anyways in their Halloween bags, but they never come. And she said, they're not coming. I said, they may be this year, but they never come. So, because they won't cross Congress Street. It's too scary.
All right, so I think that's an excellent idea. We'll send our comments.
Wait, I have a couple of things. To Fred's point just now, I'm looking at the map, and there's long stretches without a crosswalk. From Whitney, there's a crosswalk, then none at Francis, none at Edwards, none at Craigie, and then at then there's that mid-block crosswalk.
And you know why that's
Craigie
there,
and-
Zach? Somebody was literally killed there, you know, a bunch of years ago. No joke. Somebody gets
So
struck.
I mean, you know, there's just a major lack of crosswalks all the way, you know, down. Also in the judo village part as well. Someone was telling me that they have to go, if they want to go to the bus stop, which is across the street from their street, they have to walk half a mile, 4 blocks up and 4 blocks back.
And that's on
one thing.
Congress, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was on Brighton.
Yeah, Brighton's worse, but they're both bad.
Oh yeah, no. So
Well,
anyway,
I mean, and the crosswalks that are on Brighton, they might as well not be there. It's like you have to walk your body out into traffic to stop anybody. Nobody stops.
Oh yeah, I use the stroller.
Yeah, see, people see a baby stroller, that usually slows them down.
Usually.
I mean,
I want to do an experiment with dragging a baby doll. I really do want to do this with one of those flashing beacons, and dragging it like a baby crawling to see if anyone stops. But then the other thing I had was
I go out
usually
in like a reflective safety vest, and they still don't. I mean, I literally cross the street wearing a reflective safety vest, and they still don't stop. When I have the light, they just don't see pedestrians.
I really don't like those flashing beacons. I think they're more dangerous. I think people assume that when they see it, that people have already passed, and they just blow through.
It's weird. Like I was driving tonight and I noticed when the beacon is going, because it's so bright and it messes with your eyes, it makes it harder to see pedestrians. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, but there's something weird going on there. It actually, because it's throwing so much light in your face, it's harder to actually see a pedestrian. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think so.
we got to do some guerrilla theater stuff. Like, did anyone ever see the Yes Men Save the World?
No.
It's a really cool documentary about these guys that posed as executives from Union Carbide and said that they were really sorry for killing all those people in India, and they weren't really executives from Union Carbide. So we got to do
They
something
show
like
big
that.
conferences.
Pose as MDOT officials and hold a press conference and say that we're going to do some traffic calming on Congress Street, and then
We're
see
so
what
sorry
happens.
for all the people that died driving around the corner. There's like this one bend in the road on Congress where like literally multiple people have died hitting that pole. And they could, you know, say they're so sorry that they never moved that pole or straightened the curve.
Zach looks scholarly and academic. We could get him to pose as an MDOT engineer, and he could probably pull it off, actually. And then he could say all kinds of things that sound semi-plausible, and then we could see what happens.
Yeah, I'll practice my shoegazing. The other thing, though, usually the chair signs letters. I don't think we have to do it that way, but that's normally, you know, that's how we've done it in the past.
Well, Margaret can get the letter over to Maureen when it's been reviewed.
Okay.
We can co-sign it.
Yeah, no, it's just that I'm the one who's been in touch with various people at the city since 2012. And, I sent it to Maureen because I wanted it to go, officially through the neighborhood.
I think that's important. Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay, so
We should call the question.
So anyway, send comments. It's more
So
like to resolve any disagreements before we send it. That's all.
we didn't make the motion or we didn't vote on it.
we did make a
Made a
we
motion.
made
We
motion
just
and
not
second.
voted. So all in
Yeah, we-
favor of Margaret compiling a list of concerns and then us reviewing it and sending it to the city.
I'm in favor, but I don't think I'm eligible to vote.
Who knows?
You've been to a meeting before, I think, right?
Yeah, like a long time ago.
So moved. We can talk about this maybe at our next meeting, Margaret, because I know Jeremiah said that at least for the Congress Street stuff, they were getting started in February, so we should probably have something to them.
Right.
ASAP.
Yep.
Um,
That
Great.
probably means like June or July, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's only starting. Yeah, who knows? He said sometime in 2021, which
Yeah, I mean, they were starting in 2018. Hell, they were starting in 2012.
we're supposed to have a playground like 6 months ago, so.
Yeah, wasn't that last year?
But hey,
What? No,
I hold out hope.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
No, and it's a serious issue. The Franklin arterial thing, I started working on that when I was in my 30s, and now I'm in my 50s. Like,
Has it?
if a state agency doesn't want to do anything, they don't do it. They just slow-footed along. But I wanted to say in my my other life, not exactly, the Bike Ped Committee started a subcommittee on neighborhood traffic speeds at our last meeting. And we're going to be doing neighborhood outreach. So we just started it we just met on Monday. So that Maya, who's from Nason's Corner and is on a Libbytown list, she's the chair of the committee. So we'll be fighting it on that front as well.
That would be awesome. And, I do drive, and I'll just point out that when it changes randomly, it makes it even harder to be a responsible driver. It's like when you're coming in from Outer Congress into town, it's 30, it's 35, it's 30, and suddenly right before Westgate, it goes back up to 35, like right at Westgate. And it just, I think for just common sense and safety and everything else, if it was just one consistent speed across the city, wouldn't that just be more logical?
Makes
I
sense.
guess.
I don't
I
know.
mean, it depends, I guess.
I mean, seriously, next time you drive on Outer Congress coming in, watch those signs. They're really
Oh,
great.
yeah, they go 30, 45, or, 30, yeah. Out by the airport there, by the Alps Club, it speeds up, and then when you get to, Stroudwater, it drops back down, and yeah, it's crazy.
And then Westgate, it goes back up to 35.
Right.
Makes no sense. So
Yeah.
anyway, I find that randomness as a driver to be, the unpredictability is not helpful.
Yeah.
I saw someone, he must have been going 70 miles on Congress Street by, in between the Trestle and 295.
Nice.
Real, huh?
Fairly common.
I did get an email back from someone at the city asking where we want to see enforcement, which kind of made my jaw hit the floor because I've been begging for that since 2018. But
Well,
we'll see.
there are two things that this subcommittee's been talking about, and as I said, it's only 2 days old, but long time in the making, is there's those, what are they called? The flashing speed limit signs that tell you how fast you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are said to be fairly effective. They're certainly effective to me. I always slow down when it calls me out. I don't know what the psychology is, but it also collects data. So you can request to have that put someplace, and they kind of move them around and collect data and do what they will with that.
Let's do that. Let's do that for sure.
But then there's also a technology out there that someone on the committee has access to, which tracks people's cell phone, tracks people via their cell phones. And tells you what the average speed is and all sorts of stuff like that. So they get all that information and more, I suppose, through this
Really good
software.
to
I
have.
forgot what that's called as well. So it would be kind of interesting to well, collect data both ways, compare them, and the whole thing. So it's a matter of how much, you know,
I feel like the problem with those signs, Zach, is like what you're saying is people slow down. So it's collecting the data, but the people are already slowing down because they put those on our street a couple of times, and like everyone automatically starts driving slower. So then that data is a little bit like it's not as good.
Well, but it counts the number of people who respond to the sign as well, though. So that's useful information, I think.
Right. How many people are actually using the road too?
Right.
So supposedly those work better with positive reinforcement, and in Kittery, I've noticed if you're doing the right thing, it gives you a thumbs up.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is kind of corny, but apparently people respond better to positive reinforcement than being told you're screwing up. So apparently that's what they're doing in Kittery.
I like that.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, Margaret, for bringing this up and agreeing to be the point person for it. So hopefully we can make some positive action. We can always.
So I mean, what do we think about the 25-mile-an-hour thing? Do we just drop it?
No.
Yeah, I don't
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where else we go though. Like, I'm not sure what the right next step would be, but
We received your answer. We don't like your answer.
Well, Chris Branch, who's Public Works, hasn't replied. Chris Branch I got an out of office reply from him, and originally he was very agreeable to the idea. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
But he's going to have to defer to MDOT. I think if MDOT has ultimate authority on that road stretch, then it might be good to just go over Steve Landry's head.
Maybe just ask we request further clarification.
Zach, didn't you find in the meeting there was something about the District 3 meeting where it wasn't clear who gets to decide speed limits? Do you remember that part?
Yeah, well, because I said, let's have an MDOT official at the next meeting, and he said, we don't need MDOT, we have complete control over our roads.
And that
I
was
said,
Chris
"Oh,
Branch.
I didn't know that." And then, then your comment at the end, he was like, well, then we have to ask MDOT, I don't know.
Well, no, he didn't even know about it. My comment at the end, he had no idea
but he
it
did
happened.
say, we'd have, I mean, and that'd have to go through MDOT. Yeah, so, right.
All right.
Well, maybe
I guess my only hope was
Zager to talk to somebody at MDOT. I don't know.
I mean, MDOT's responsible to the governor and the legislature. All of them are term limited. Those people get their job out of UMO when they're 23 and stay until retirement.
right.
So I read your article about bureaucrats, and I don't agree with all of it. I'm going to have a chat with you afterwards.
So maybe when Grayson is sworn in, is he's the person who might be able to get a meeting with MDOT?
They've been sworn in, so I think that's a great idea to ask him to put some pressure on Sam Zager too, even though it's close to the district he's in. He's definitely passionate about transportation. Yeah.
Okay. It just seemed like such a small ask. I mean, it's just 4 more blocks or whatever.
MDOT will never voluntarily change anything.
Although maybe
We feel like if we give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
if Jonathan Sahrbeck is anything like Bill Barr, maybe we can press him to our advantage.
But yeah, maybe we can at least ask, like, can you, if he just made that blanket statement, it's like, can you send us the data on that? Or
Yeah, exactly. Could you show us the study? Because we're really curious.
Can you share it with us?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just said silly things. All right. Well, lots to do.
Yeah. So if we feel comfortable moving on for this at the moment,
that was it.
Zach, you wanted to talk about zoning. I do have to try to be done not too late tonight. So there's some stuff I can push till next meeting that I was going to talk about. But Zach, did you want to talk about zoning?
Remind me what I wanted to talk about.
Well, you just said zoning.
Was that deal behind Tony's Donuts?
I don't know if it was
and-
specifically the one by Tony's Donuts, the zone change for that area of Congress, or
Oh, right.
you had texted me that you wanted to talk about zoning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with just the zone change, I mean, for me, the question is not like whether we want a dispensary or an art gallery or housing or a dispensary or more housing or a dispensary and a, I don't know, daycare center. It's whether we want a dispensary or a dead gas station. That's my piece on that. So for that reason, I'm in favor of the zone change because I'm not crazy about a dispensary, but I don't like the dead gas station even more.
Well, yeah, and
I guess
and I was going to say just that, I mean, it seems like the notion that a dispensary is always going to be there because allowing for other uses in the future would also be something that would be a potential argument in favor of a zone change, although I can't predict whether or not the dispensaries, once they set up shop, they're just going to be there for decades to come. But it seems like the potential for other businesses or uses to be there would be a potential net benefit based on some of the feedback we were getting through the email chatter, right? There are a lot of great ideas, coffee shop, yoga studio, child daycare. I mean, all that stuff would be great, but right now we got a pot shop, right? So, I mean, and there seemed like there was a sentiment to try and oppose the zone change so we could not get another pot shop, right?
I guess
So
I
I mean, I guess I'm
understand-
saying I kind of agree with you, Zach, in that sense.
I don't understand why the zone change has to continue like several buildings into Mass and several buildings into Douglas.
I think, was it Nick? Nick was talking about spot zoning. You mean you can't just, they couldn't just pick a parcel and then, you know, drop a zone on top of that. They have to do it in a more, and Zach probably, I mean, Zach has tapped into this rezone thing, I think, but I think it has something to do with that. And maybe Damon knows something about the zoning process as well, but I'm pretty sure it was a spot zoning concern.
Yeah, I mean, they don't like spot zoning. They were doing that and they didn't like it. So.
But why not just do the buildings that actually abut Congress Street and leave the side streets alone? Like what's the number of parcels that are considered to be spot versus not spot? I just feel like it's really chopping into the residential side streets as proposed.
Maybe. I mean, it seems like, I think I hear your point, Mark. It's like gerrymandering, right? You kind of, you pick the zone, you pick the geographic area that you want to zone as this particular zone, but I don't know the details.
I don't know, they're probably idiots. And probably the practice is to take a compass and draw a circle around, the point where they're doing it and say everything within the circle gets zone change along with it, rather than looking at the map and looking at the fabric and saying, oh yeah, well, why don't we do a quarter mile, in either direction linearly rather than circularly.
Right.
That's
well,
probably how it goes. But
Congress Street is commercial, it is what it is, but the side streets are still residential. So I guess I just don't understand how they picked the lots.
well, I think what I said is probably why they do it. I mean, I could make the argument that says, well, we could have a little bit of a higher density residential on those side streets as we move into the and then it sort of scales down as you get deeper into the residential area. If I wanted to be charitable.
I mean, you may be right, because at my end, the zoning change goes through my garage, which is attached to my house. So apparently I can have a dental office in my garage.
Oh,
it's in a different zone than my attached
that
house.
sounds fun.
Yeah, isn't it? It's
Just for
really
fun, yeah.
Seriously, you should look at the zoning map. Where they drew the line is literally right through my house.
No, let me get it.
Who knows? Maybe it is what they do. They just spin a compass. I have no
I once saw a proctologist next door to your house.
They moved, thank goodness. They moved out.
Yeah, I know.
Is the Portland, whoever those are, Visit Portland, are they much better neighbors?
Oh my gosh, they're amazing. Yes, they're so much better neighbors. Yes.
The people on at the end of my street were saying how horrible the medical office was as neighbors.
really outgrown the space, and
Yeah.
they didn't have enough parking, and I know nobody who misses them, and I'll be kind and leave it at that. Nobody misses them.
Hey, we probably ought to be kind to Maureen because I think she's got to skedaddle pretty quick.
Okay.
Maureen, how are you doing for time?
Well, the one thing I did want to get to tonight was talking about nonprofit status, something we've been sort of talking about and then not talking about it. Zach was talking to Ken Capron about becoming a nonprofit, and he sort of made it seem like it was the better idea. It seemed like, I don't know, do we want to do the work to become a nonprofit? Because I think in some instances it would make it easier for us to do things like collect donations. Or do we want to keep going on as we have been? Something recently happened where someone said to me, "Oh, we like neighborhood associations to be nonprofits because it makes it easier for us," or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Sorry, my mind is.
Ed money or something.
So one thing, I've looked into this a little bit. I think it merits some research to weigh out the pros and cons. Right now we are a nonprofit, but we're not a tax exempt nonprofit. We do have a tax number, but it's not. We're not in a specific category. We're like in this not otherwise specified category. So if somebody wanted to say make a donation and then have it be tax deductible, which is kind of hard to do these days, but for some people that might be the case. And for corporations and whatnot, that's still the case, I think. They would want that. So it would also allow us to say receive like a grant. Usually that's required for, to receive a grant for something. So that's sort of the pros. The cons are they increase our administrative burden a little bit. We'd have to file every year, and it'd imply that we're doing more. So that'd be, it depends how far we want to go with it. I mean, we could be the Libbytown Community Development Corporation and build housing and have a community center and have programming and have paid staff. And I mean, it could be a big thing. I mean, it could also be something in the middle. So there's some things to think about.
Yeah, I'll say that I've been doing volunteer work in various capacities for a number of years, and this group is really, really well organized, all volunteer. And when I did with Presumpscot Regional Land Trust now, it's a land trust. Before that, it was just a water quality monitoring group, and we had 501c3 status, and we were nowhere near as well organized as the Libbytown Neighborhood Association is, and we were able to get our annual tax filing done. It's a pretty low. I mean, if you just want to maintain base level 501c3 status, it's pretty easy to do. And then based on all the work that we do now as, not being bona fide 501c3, I don't see it as being a big, heavy lift at all, really. I mean, but maybe and I didn't do all of the stuff behind the scenes, but I did some of it, and it wasn't, and I'm not that well organized, and it didn't seem like it was that onerous, I guess.
Yeah, I think we might be ready for it.
Could we like, for instance, like the main med grant, if we ever get it, could we just get like directly accepted if we were like a 501c3 and then use it?
Sure, yeah.
Like,
yes.
So that would be nice to do, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's just something I would like to put out there. I said potentially vote, but I don't know that I feel ready to vote on it yet or not. It's just something that I wanted to think about, like moving into a new year, like whether that's something we think might be worthwhile for this organization, or if we want to take more time to think about it, or if we just want to keep going on as we are.
I think it might be worth coming up with a list of the pros and cons, and then considering it maybe at next meeting.
Yeah. I think coming up the pros and cons list. I love that.
I'm more open to it now than I have been. Some of these pros and cons, like pros, you're able to apply for grants. Con, you have to write grant applications. But just in my conversation with Ken Capron, he gets very, passionate and excited about the things he's excited about. Nonprofits is one of them. I guess he's had a career in nonprofits, and he was telling me how easy it would be, how we've done the hardest part, which is come up with our bylaws. You can even get money from discretionary funds from the city councilor, which I wasn't aware of, and the only time I've ever heard about that, to pay for it. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. But,
I just think it
You
makes an
folks,
interesting thing to explore.
does anybody have a sense of other neighborhood associations, whether they're what their status is, and would that be useful
think
to
some
compare?
some
Friends of
aren't.
Rupert's Corner is a 501c3, right?
I think Rena is too, aren't they? Isn't West
Yeah.
End?
West End is.
It's a mix. Some are and some aren't.
Yeah.
Parkside is looking to become it, and that's what they're using their main med grant for.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you guys, I mean, golly, just the work that I've seen so many of you do, grant writing is, you know, I mean, it's not a trivial undertaking, but I mean, it's well within our wheelhouse, I think, you know, just the capacity that we have with the various members of this group. I don't see that. I mean, it's time, right? You know, but golly, you guys put so much time into this now. I think it would be, you know, and depending on the grant, it would be, you know, it would be pretty cool just to get money directly, you know, if possible. So I sent a link, and I don't think it's the end all be all, but the kind of a Maine Association of Nonprofits is a good reference just to kind of get a sense of what would be involved to establish a 501c3, just to kind of get some basis background for, making an informed decision, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll put this on the agenda for the next meeting, and I'll do my research, and everyone can come up with their pros and cons, and we'll list them out and sort of go from there. And then I have some ideas. The last thing on the agenda was just me. My time has been a little bit stretched between various things. So moving into the new year, I'm going to start doing a more regular schedule of posting on social media. I want to talk about the kinds of things that we want to post on the page, because like things like Facebook work better when you post more often. People see your posts. So like, what kind of things do we want to put out to the community? I haven't been posting the monthly meetings just because putting a Zoom link out there made me nervous that we were going to get weird like Zoom crashers. So I haven't been posting the link, but I don't know, maybe I'll figure out how I feel about it moving forward. I don't know. I'm just going to get on a more regular schedule of that kind of stuff. And then Zach had written a nice blurb that I don't know if everyone had a chance to read, to update our city website page. And I was going to maybe submit some pictures to that just to kind of zhuzh that up a little bit, because it's sort of generic looking. It doesn't have our logo on it, you know, all that stuff.
Should I stop goofing around with the meeting minutes and not putting bogus stuff in there just because?
No, I like the bogus stuff. I'm gonna make a note of the thing you do this week so that I'll be prepared next meeting. You caught me off guard yet again.
The only comment I had on the update to the mission statement was I don't think we necessarily initiate affordable housing. The neighborhood association supports it, but I don't think we can take credit for initiating it.
I agree. I don't remember seeing initiate, actually. I need to read it.
Well, I think I might have, let me read it. I think I was initiatives.
Right, initiative, sorry, yes. But I don't think that was necessarily the neighborhood association's initiative. I mean, the neighborhood association certainly supported it when it was offered or suggested, but I don't think that we can claim credit for initiating it.
No, the neighborhood definitely initiated it. Nicasito, it's all his brainchild. But for me, initiatives is a little different from initiating. I'm trying to find the language.
Yes, one is a verb and one is a noun, but they mean the same thing.
Initiatives is like a new thing. Initiate is to start something.
Well, I think maybe I'm gonna reread it and we'll.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing. It's just something that gets sent. I don't think it's anything that needs to be voted on. Just Maureen and or the board, decides to update it as needed.
I don't know who looks at those things, but I did when I moved here.
Oh, people look at it and contact us, and bother us.
Also, I'd like to point out Woody, who is Fred's new cat, who you can see there, that used to live at the cat doctor and now lives at Fred's house. So,
Oh,
just very recently.
He's super cool. He's a pretty cool cat.
baby. Oh, Woody. So anyway, so I'll
You could
send
change
that.
initiatives to projects. That's fine with me.
Yeah,
He's a tuxedo cat.
he's very handsome.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any white on his face though, so it makes him extra dapper.
He's a bruiser too,
Really
kind
does
of.
look like he was wearing a tuxedo. It's very impressive.
He's very cute. He needs a tiny bow tie.
He knows we're talking about him. He's
So
got
yeah,
these
does
really
anyone
cool cats.
have anything else they'd like to discuss at this month's meeting? I feel like it was a lively one.
Yeah, pay attention. Pay attention to our guests for this. I'm going to stick something in there this time with a link too. So.
I just have a quick playground update.
Oh, great.
The city got 4 proposals, which I think I mentioned, for playground equipment to spend the CDBG grant money on. And finally had a meeting where we looked at the proposals and discussed them. And it sounds like they're hoping to buy the equipment soon. And then they were talking about installing it in the spring. So that's what they were talking about, at least. We'll see what happens.
nice.
What did
They're
they do?
less well organized than we are, for sure.
Did they select one of the proposals, or did they? What was the deal with all of the proposals? Did they?
Sorry, what was the question again, Fred?
So there were 4 proposals. Did they have to choose just one, or could they take them all? Or
No, yeah, it was, they were gonna choose one, and the choosing didn't actually happen at that meeting, so they're gonna go through a scoring process now. So, yeah, they're pretty small. I have to say I was kind of disappointed by what you can buy for $125,000 for playground equipment, but it's certainly better than what we have.
Is it at all in keeping with this whole idea of sort of like a natural playscape, or is it just standard equipment?
Some of them were. Some of them are like pretty standard plastic and metal, but at least one was like really nice wood.
Yeah, I think there's still gonna be landscaping and stuff. This is just for like the actual like play equipment, like the structures that the children climb.
Exactly.
Do children things on?
The children climb upon and fall down from.
Or they do child things
They do those children things that they do. They seem to.
that we non-parents can't understand.
I mean, I get it. I just, hopefully we'll have a playground there when any of the children in Libbytown are still children. That's the goal, right? When your baby is still young enough to swing on a swing, hopefully there will be that opportunity.
Yeah, well, I'm still young at heart.
Yeah. Well, Mary's been wanting that playground for 40 years, so I kind of want her to see it. Maybe her grandkids can play on it.
We should name it after her.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Well, if no one has anything else, I would say happy holidays to everyone. And our next meeting will be on January 20th, which is inauguration day, actually.
Woohoo!
And yeah, we'll reconvene then and discuss 2021 and why it's going to be awesome. Not at all like 2020, right?
Thank you,
maybe
everybody.
one day we'll meet in person again. All right.
That's it. Bye, everyone.
Right, sounds
Happy
good.
holidays.
Good to see you all.
Good night, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Talk soon.
Bye.